Yeah, hello and welcome to a new episode of our weekly Spielworxx chat season 2. My name is Uli Blennemann and I'm having designer Alison Collins from Australia as my guest today. And being from, as we say, down under means that it is in the middle of the night. So what is the local time, Alison?
It is currently 2:45 in the morning.
So thank you so much for being my guest at this really horrible time. But
No,
despite
thank you.
but despite the time, how are you, Alison?
I'm amazing. I'm so excited to be here today and to chat with you, Uli. And yeah, thank you so much for inviting me.
So
I'm keen
so
to talk about my game.
it's all my pleasure. So really wonderful. And yeah, there are already some people here in the chat. So somebody's saying good morning. Yes, thank you. And there's Chris. Hello, Chris from the UK. For you, it's not morning, but yeah. But Alison won third place with her design, and now my bad pronunciation comes in with her design Winay Kawsay in the Zenobia Awards. And so congratulations, so woohoo! So
Thank
I'm a
you.
really wonderful. And let me put the URL of the Zenobia Awards winners in here. So if you want to know a little bit more, so check out this website. So it's here. And by the way, if you have questions or comments, please put them in the chat window, and Alison may even respond. So we'll see. So to start, Alison, please tell us a little bit about yourself. So, what are you doing for a living?
Obviously, I'm based in Australia. I actually, for the Zenobia Award, I'd never really designed games before Winay Kawsay, and my experiences in the Zenobia Award were so wonderful, and I loved game design so much. My job title changed over the course of the Zenobia Award, and I last month started a job as a graduate game designer
Wow.
at a mobile game studio here in Brisbane. Thanks to the work I'd done on Zenobia, I believe, primarily. So yeah, I'm a graduate game designer at Half Brick Studios, and I also am a casual academic or tutor at the University of Queensland, where I teach some design computing subjects.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
This is wonderful, and Nimitas in the chat is saying congrats, and from me,
Oh,
the
thank
same
you.
thing. So this is great to hear. And what is even more astonishing is that Winay Kawsay is your first design, and for a first, not even if this would be your 50s design, I'd say it's great quality. But this is astonishing. Wonderful. So
Thank
you are
you.
not necessarily a long time gamer, or are you a long time gamer, but just not designing games, Alison?
Yeah, so I've always loved games. Like I started with like so many people, started playing board games at a pretty young age. Lots of casual games mostly, and then progressed into video games over time and really just love playing all sorts of games, casual, super strategic, narrative driven is probably my favorite in the video game sphere. In board games, it's been very interesting with Zenobia because it's obviously historical board games and I'd never really played a lot of historical board games. So this whole side of the board gaming world has really opened up to me and opened my eyes through Zenobia. But, I love just any experience playing games, if it's, just with friends and it's just a good laugh and good fun, or, trying to be strategic and really thinking through options. Like it's all fun to me. But I'd never really lent my hand to designing games. It had been something that always seemed so interesting and fun. And I loved the idea of trying to, pair mechanics with, trying to evolve strategies. And on top of that, thinking about how a narrative or a story or a moral message can fit into all of that. And it had never been something I'd really explored or done. And then Zenobia came up, and it was something that I could really start to learn further. Even though I'd dabbled in it and I think we'll get to this. I dabbled in an initial design of Winay Kawsay earlier, but um, I wouldn't call that version of the game any good. So
Yeah, well, so you finally found a good game here, a good game design in there. So no worries. But did you first think about your game that you submitted to the Zenobia Awards before you knew about the Zenobia Awards, or were the Zenobia Awards the reason to submit it?
So a little bit of both. I guess the background with Winay Kawsay is that um, I was given our capstone university assignment for my history degree was do it something that's not an essay. And
Mm-hmm.
immediately I thought, oh, I want to do a board game. I want to learn about making a board game and just as bringing a historical topic into a game setting, I thought it would be a really fun thing to lend my hand to. And the topic of Winay Kawsay and the history of Machu Picchu and the history of the history making process of Machu Picchu is something I'd previously explored in another course, and just it seemed to lean itself really well to a board game. This idea of exploring different interpretations, and at that time the original prototype was more about delving into historical malpractice and really forcing the players to do these sort of erroneous methods of conducting history.
Yes.
And so the initial design for that university assessment was mainly focused on the history and almost a proof of concept that this historical setting could work in a board game. The mechanics were sort of very dumbed down, very, very simple, akin to snakes and ladders, dare I say. Um, Mainly because I knew the focus of the assessment was on the historical setting, and also I didn't think that my lecture and then the markers of the assessment could handle much more than snakes and ladders. That's a horror.
Yeah,
Um,
sometimes this makes sense to dump it down a little bit.
but but still, I once the game was done, and it it had its moments. That original game, there were some. You got a laugh or two out of the 40 minutes that it went for.
So, yeah.
But the idea stuck with me, right? Like I just thought this idea is very interesting and could be explored further, but it just wasn't something that I really put any time into exploring. And then I saw the Zenobia Award. I saw it advertised on Twitter, and I thought,
Mm,
oh, I have a historical board game that I'd really love to develop more, but I just never sort of the opportunity just never presented itself, or I never, you know, technically you can make a game at any time. You don't need a contest to do it.
mm,
But I just guess that it had never really crossed my mind it never crossed my mind that there was an avenue for me to sort of explore it and that it might actually go somewhere, or I might
mm,
be able to get help from, the incredible mentors that
mm,
Zenobia had, or that there was any opportunity that this little game that I submitted as a university assignment could turn into something that could actually be published. Like for me,
mm,
they're two different worlds. And so I think really seeing Zenobia and I went into it not even really knowing
mm,
how scope of it. I just thought, oh wow, let's give it a try. Let's give it a go,
mm.
and see where it leads. And it's led to the most incredible things for me, and I can't speak more highly of my experience in the Zenobia Award and what it's done for me as a designer, and for Winay Kawsay.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting, and I've said this here before. Weeks and months before the Zenobia Awards are really a wonderful thing, and I've seen so many great entries into this award. So it's really the quality is amazing. And here in the chat is hello Nicholas, hello Jay Foolsgard, good seeing you. And there's already a question from this a nice name Kratzspitzdolch, so nice German name I guess. I'm sure the question will come up, but is there already a publisher for the game? Maybe Spielworxx. No, Spielworxx right now not. We are hoping here that the phone is ringing, Asmodee is on the phone, and then this contract is done. But yes, there is definitely interest from publishers for the game, but nothing has been decided here. But Alison, we talked before, and you said that you are not that well integrated into the greater Australian gaming scene. But what is interesting to me, how did you test the game and where did you test the game? Was everything during the pandemic done online or how did you do this?
Yes, so everything in the pandemic was done online testing the game. So given that my experiences with Zenobia have been fully online, there's only a digital prototype. I tried to make a physical version once, and it ended with me trying to paint blocks a certain color, and I gave up. Um, um, but you know, I've got this tabletop simulator mod, and that really allowed me to test with anyone from all over the world. So I was really lucky that my playtesters involved some of my good friends who were here in Brisbane, and also some great friends in New Zealand and India. I was lucky enough to be able to playtest with some incredible people who joined a Discord server that I set up after the spring deployment of ST HisCon in May. Some absolutely wonderful people said they would help and have a playtest. And I've also done some great playtesting with some people on the really wonderful Whirligig server, and had some really lovely chats with some people there giving feedback. So it's really just been anyone who's been interested has either reached out and said, oh, I want to play the game. And, we've organized a playtest, and I've, sort of reached out to a few friends who love playing board games. But yeah, just anyone who's been interested, it's been lovely to engage and do these playtests and get feedback, not just from other game designers or more established ones, which I've been very lucky to do, but my friends who also, I think, perhaps a few of them want to sort of experience game design and have a hand in this, and I've found it quite interesting. Sort of, they have no game design background, but they've still got some absolutely incredible insights, and it's been lovely sort of us all learning together through doing the playtests and talking and discussing. It's been
Yeah.
a lot of fun.
Yeah, and especially sometimes it's good that you have people from outside of the gaming scene looking at a topic, because sometimes this out of the box thinking is really helpful, or it can be helpful at least sometimes. Yeah, and we will. You mentioned the TTS module. We will go to this in a minute so that people can see a little bit more here. And hello, Matze, by the way, Spieletreffenverteiler. Good seeing you. And but for the viewers before, what is Winay Kawsay about? So what is this? You hinted on this, of course, but
Yes.
what is it about?
So Winay Kawsay is a Euro-style 2 to 4 player competitive board game about the interpretations of Machu Picchu, and more broadly about sort of the history making process and the idea of historical interpretation, the idea of historical perception, and how that process is flawed to an extent, and how this idea of historians do leave their mark on history through the ways that they interpret things differently, through the ways and frameworks that they practice history, through their own desires for, to become influential or popular, through their own charisma, and through historical events that sort of change the tide of how history can be conducted. And so I was really interested in understanding Machu Picchu, and I alluded to this. My original assignment at the university was pick a city, pick a city in history, and explore that history and the idea of the city as a place where history is made. And my first thought was Machu Picchu, lost city of the Incas. That's what I'd like to do. And then when I started to have a look at it, I found out that there was a really big there's a lot of different hypotheses to what it actually was. Some people have thought it was the lost city. Other people have suggested it's a royal estate, a religious site, a citadel, a few other interpretations as well. And different historians have interpreted different parts of the site to put forward their interpretation. So, for example, there have been, different pieces of evidence that suggest population size, which point towards or against particular interpretations, particular sort of structural features that seem to have a religious significance, other parts that suggest some sort of fortification and defense, its location, its alignment with the sun in various regards, the fact it's at the sacred Huayna Picchu and Machu Picchu mountains, the Urubamba River being a sacred river that sort of surrounds the site. All these different factors have been interpreted by different historians in different ways to suggest these multiple conclusions. And on top of that, some of the interpretations have been flawed over time. So some historians have come in and made these well, one in particular, back in sort of the first part of the 20th century, came in, made these grand sweeping statements, and not always because they were sort of genuinely interpreting evidence. There was this figure, the one I keep alluding to, called Hiram Bingham III, and he was this swashbuckling adventure figure who wanted to find Vilcabamba, the lost last city of the Inca. And he reached Machu Picchu, and he decided that
That
Machu
must
Picchu
be,
was it. It
yeah.
must be it. It's so grand, it's so beautiful. It must be this fabled city. And so his perception of viewing the site was immediately, yes, look at this. Of course, that means it's the lost city. I cite this, I cite that. And he made some mistakes. And yet, a lot of history has sought to debunk this hypothesis, but it's this sort of mythology and this idea of the lost city still sticks with us.
Yes.
And so this idea of sort of the interpretation and the rigor of the interpretation versus the influence and the charisma of the historian was something that I found really interesting to explore.
Yeah, yeah, please go.
Yeah, and so what I really wanted the game to do is not only look at those different historical interpretations, but look at those modes of thinking.
Yes.
So the game has three different sort of pathways the player can progress to interpret and sort of the historical lenses at which things are viewed. One of which being the popularizer based off of Bingham, this idea of the historian who puts more emphasis on themselves than perhaps what they're trying to promote. And at the end of the game, the sort of victory currency is influence minus one's impact. So really important is this idea of impact to the site, and the fact that historians and archaeologists come in, they change things up, they take evidence from the site, which is very pertinent to Machu Picchu, the idea of the removal of artifacts away from Machu Picchu and Peru more broadly. And the site is not the same after historians both remove evidence and physically affect the site, but also after they build up a different perception of things and
Yes.
color other people's lenses
Yes.
and perceptions and ideas. So really, that's broadly what. Well, that wasn't particularly broad, Alison.
That was fine.
That is what the game is about, and engaging in these different topics in a way that is competitive and hopefully really fun.
Yeah, man, and this is, in my opinion, it makes for the appeal of the game because it's different. And we are seeing. I have to go to the chat, and because there are some comments in general on the Zenobia Awards and on your design. So let's go back here from the back. So Nimitas is saying Zenobia challengers seem very interesting designs in general. I don't know the rules, but by the looks, they seem to be very original as historical games were usually associated with war games. Yes, I'm a war gamer personally, and 40 years ago, when I started gaming, these games weren't available for sure. But these seem to go beyond classic hex and counter boards. Yes, for sure. And Nicolas, by the way, he has also a very good entry in the Zenobia Awards, and he's confirming that many games are social cultural games, which opens the way for exploring many other ways to mechanically express those situations. And we will go to the mechanics in a minute. I'm promising this. And Nicholas is also saying, I think that it's great that the setting of the game itself is multi-layered, having the archaeological side to be very important, but the actual historical framework is that of the research of the site, which would in theory even extend to today. And yes, it does this. And yes, and he's stressing it's not a Machu Picchu game in the way you would probably expect. And of course, there are already a few games out there, but they are more, let's put it for now, traditional games on this. And there's a question by Kras Spitzdolch. Again, I love that name. Was the topic inspired by your honorary experiences, observations in the university context, or?
I definitely think the idea of sort of especially the popularizer, with people perhaps being a bit more fascinated with themselves than what they were putting forward. And also another one of the pathways is the determinists, so a very narrow-minded, blinkers on focus to history. It must be this one conclusion to the exclusion of everything else. I must admit, I did see that a little bit in the university setting. So, though the model itself that the game represents is based on Machu Picchu and the Machu Picchu historians, I think it does resonate with, and I've talked to a few people who have been in academia, and it has resonated with some of their experiences, both in terms of publishing, but also the broader academic setting. So yes, yes,
Yeah.
I did meet a few popularizers and determinists at university.
Yeah, I can understand this. My university experience is 35, even more than 35 years ago, till so 29 years, I think. And I know a little bit about this too. And my wife, she worked 12 years at the university. So I can understand, yes. I'd love to talk to you about the key mechanics of the game now. Alison, would you like to screen share maybe the TTS
Yeah, I'd love
module?
to. All right, let's start sharing. Okay, so
This is
hopefully
black. Yeah, there we are. And I
there
have to already
we
say,
go.
this is a wonderful looking module. So you see, it's fascinating. And so, of course, you can have a wonderful topic for a game. You can have a new approach for a topic. But in the end, if the mechanics are not interesting, it's nothing. It's really just a study. So, Alison, what are the key mechanics of the game? And maybe can you zoom in even a little bit
Mm,
more so that people can even
yeah.
see more? It's really great looking. You're setting up some
Oh,
cards.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll set up a basic sort of
Yes.
starting game setup. Essentially, the game is comprised of 6 different phases that can occur. Most of the phases are just sort of simple calculation phases, but the main one is sort of visiting the site and collecting evidence.
Uh-huh.
The game is split into this idea of going to the site, collecting evidence, building up your evidence set, then going over and publishing that evidence predominantly to
Can
help
you
build up.
even, sorry to
Yes.
interrupt, can you even
Oh,
zoom
yes.
in there a little bit more? Because I love this. I love this part. So, because you really trying to publish this, and you see,
Mm,
these are the historical magazines and journals, not magazines, journals in there. So I love that part here. Publish a paper. So wonderful,
yes.
wonderfully done, Alison.
No,
Yeah.
thank you. So yes, the sort of main way to build oneself up is through publication. Those publications will then become little publication books on one's shelf, and they can then be used to advance your tenure, and sort of build yourself up as a historian of a particular discipline and pathway, but
Yes.
also interpretation. And so the main sort of key mechanic to the game, I guess, well, the two ones that I think are
Yes.
particularly fun. The first one Uli's alluded to is this idea of publication. And I really wanted to simulate, I heard a phrase which was publish or perish, when
Yes.
referred to academia. I really love that phrase. And so really I wanted this publication process to be that sort of competition. So players submit their evidence, and each historical evidence at the site, they're all based on genuine evidence used by historians. And each one suggests a particular interpretation. So, for example, these civilian buildings are highly suggestive that Machu Picchu was a lost city, for example, and the
Yes.
points range for this range from 1 to 3. And then you have other pieces of evidence that, for example, suggest towards multiple different interpretations. There's even some that detract from interpretations. I'll see if I can. No, luck is not on my side. There aren't any around. So what the players will do is they'll visit the site. Each player has little researcher meeples, and they'll go to the site and collect these evidence cards, and then also collect blocks from the site. And why I really wanted the blocks to be collected as well as the evidence is to show as I said before, the historians taking and removing from the site, and why this is important we'll get to later, because the site will be rebuilt in the perception. So the players will be removing these blocks and removing cards and adding them to their hand, and then they'll come over to publish. So each publication has a certain number of maximum cards required for each player and will grant a certain coloured book. So a player will say that they wish to publish using their lead academic, which is the one with a big head.
Which is also a nice feature.
The big-headed academic does the publishing. And so the player will put down cards, and then other players can choose to either try hijack the publication or try co-author the publication. And this is done by trying to outbid each other on the points. So the cards that you submit for a publication, well, actually that one's not a great one to be going for the publication for. So a player will say, I wish to publish, and put their cards face down. Another player will come along and sort of also play a researcher, but not their big-headed lead researcher. They'll play a normal researcher. All players will have the opportunity to partake, also making sure to wager these blocks as well. So from their hand, I'm just taking from the model at the moment. And then once everyone's wagered the cards that they wish to wager for the publication, it will be revealed, and whoever's got the highest point total towards the highest point scoring interpretation will win the publication. So in this particular case, there's 5 points on the board to the yellow Lost City, 4 from this player and 1 from this player. And that outbids the 3 towards Religious Site and the 1 towards Royal Estate. So this player would win the publication. And in doing so, this process of publishing not only gets blocks for the books for the player's bookshelf to show that they are growing as a historian and having a greater catalogue of publications, but it's also the process of changing the colour of these blocks. And this is the second sort of large mechanic of the game, is this process of literally rebuilding and changing and recolouring the site as one's perceptions and interpretations and beliefs get recoloured as well. So the site not only represents the physical map of Machu Picchu, but as the players go along, and in this case, all the blocks would become yellow for the Lost City. So they would get, however many blocks they wagered to their hand, so 2 for this player and 1 for the other player. They could then, in a later phase of the game, if they wish to sort of build up the public perception of the Lost City, they could then play these blocks on the model. And you'll literally see the site transform as the different colors of the interpretation rebuild the site. So it transcends from being sort of the physical site and the physical map of the site to being the mental model in both the academic and the public perception.
And let me briefly interrupt you. This is the second part of it, which I really think is brilliant. Because as you said, and then let's stress this, we are at first looking at the physical side of Machu Picchu, and later it's a perceived view of it. So the perception is there, and this is all on one game board. So it's really wonderful, Alison. So again, congratulations here. Yeah, and sorry for interrupting you again.
No, it's all good. I was actually the idea came about. I was given by my partner this absolutely beautiful ceramic model of Machu Picchu for Christmas, and it was right after I'd joined the Zenobia Award, and my mentor had very gently told me that the original mechanics for the game were not particularly great, and I was just thinking, oh, damn, what do I do now? How do I represent this idea of the changing of history? And I looked at this model I'd received, and I thought, oh, how nice would it be to have a little model of Machu Picchu on your table? And then it just sort of spiraled out from there, this idea of the site itself. You're physically, visually seeing not only the physical side, but seeing the way that the public perception is sort of trending and going and is built up by these different publications and also opportunities as well. I didn't really touch on opportunities, but it just, for me, having that visualization is something that is more clear to the player. They can see for themselves that the site is different, both in terms of the rebuilding by public perception, but also by the detraction, which I thought was really important to show that you can't just have the site. Like, there's been a few sort of discussions, are these blocks necessary to be on the site, and instead just show the building up. And for me, I think the degradation and detraction from the site, to visually show that as well as the building and the public perception, is so important.
Yes.
Because historians don't start with they start with a site, and that site does change as historians and archaeologists interact with the site. So it has to be building in the perception and detracting in the physical sense, in my opinion, to really show that impact effectively. I think that the metaphor of only historians only build, it just isn't right, and especially with Machu Picchu, it hasn't been right. The removal of historical artifacts has been something that's been highly and rightfully contended by the Peruvian government and Peruvian historians. And the huge impact of things such as tourism, such as engagement, has been felt at Machu Picchu, and a lot of the historical events. So the game has historical events that occur. They're all based on genuine historical events, and these sorts of things, like one has appeared here. Protests by historians and the broader community against an airport being built for tourists very close to Machu Picchu. Protests against that airport being built because that would naturally affect the site and affect historians' abilities to visit it. The huge cable car development project that was proposed in the 90s, and a lot of the broader public and historians getting behind that and saying, well, this is not going to be great for the sustainability of the site. So I really wanted to introduce these other things as well that do have a huge impact on how historians can conduct history. And the fact that at the end of the day, this idea of influence versus impact, I thought was a really important one to show. At least for me, I found that important.
Yeah, I agree, and as you know, I'm really impressed because it's different, but it all makes sense. It all makes sense. Alison, please give us some of the. And no, one thing I'd like to add is also with the blocks. If somebody is saying, yeah, well, are they really necessary? You gave a good reason why they should be there, and again, we are in a tabletop industry hobby, and so table presence is also always important. And this here, even in the TTS module, already looks so nice and so well done. But what are the basics of the game? So it's a competitive game, right? So of course it's not a cooperative, so competitive. It's 2 to 4 players, right?
Yes.
Okay, and what is the playing time, the average playing time?
So the goal for sort of players who know what they're doing is to play it within 2 hours. It really depends on how much discussion happens.
Yes.
Usually, I mean, it's playtesting, but usually found that there have been some discussions that sort of interrupt the playtime, and that's absolutely wonderful.
Yes.
And it depends on how much people sort of agonize over the strategy and over, elements of choice and engagement. But essentially, 2 hour playtime. So I guess another thing that's worth mentioning, it is a competitive game, and the goal is to win outright and have your influence be greater than everyone else's, and your impact, when that's detracted, have the highest total score. But another aspect I really wanted to simulate in the game is there are some, though, competitiveness sort of outlines everything. The way that play sort of turns out is there's actually a lot of cooperative work that happens as well.
Yes.
In so much as so players can choose interpretations, and depending on which pathway they go down, they may support multiple interpretations. So, for example, the empiricist pathway, which I haven't really discussed, which is a more open-minded perspective to history, so that, for example, Machu Picchu could have been a royal estate with religious site elements and with, militaristic citadel elements as well. So this historian will support multiple different interpretations. And in the game, players can have the same interpretation and work together to build that site together. So, and frequently in a 4-player game, there will be overlap a lot of the time, even in a 3 and 2 player game. It makes sense. It makes sense historically, and it makes sense in the game to piggyback and work off the buildings of others. Because in terms of scoring on the model, it's impossible to remember who placed which block. And more so, if I'm a Lost City historian, I benefit from someone else building up the Lost City interpretation and the public perception, understanding and believing that more. So all players who are of an interpretation gain scoring from any blocks placed by anyone on the model. And so strategically, a lot of the game is sort of figuring out what is the tide of the players. what do we all sort of, so and so is being a lost city historian, another person is being a royal estate. Which one do I do? Because if you're benefiting off the blocks they're putting down as well as your own, your score's going to be greater, and
Yeah.
more so, you're going to be adding to and building off a rich historical setting and presence that's already there, rather than trying to carve this niche pathway for yourself.
Yeah.
However, the victory point currency is influence, and that's influence on you as a historian. So
Yes.
if you are going to piggyback and work off the work of other prominent historians, how do you carve that niche for yourself? Because you're all gaining the same points for scoring if you share an interpretation. So trying to find unique ways to one up your fellow players, or to find an interpretation that you alone, sort of want to build and subscribe to, or even choosing between the different pathways that have different scoring options, and potentially switching. There's sort of an emergent strategy in some of the playtests of players developing one track and then switching their whole philosophy on history, to try and say, well, how do I uniquely sort of capture the academic and public perception of Machu Picchu? What one of these pathways is not only going to best support my belief, but allow me to uniquely score. So it's not just about racking up points, it's
Yes.
finding unique ways to rack up points, which is why there are also sort of opportunities players can be involved in that help them to uniquely score or uniquely gain points, but they're contingent on being of a certain tenure level a lot of the time. So it's interesting to see how players go about this and try to find when to support other players and when to undermine other players. There's even a whole historical events system. Occasionally, these will reveal an event that everyone must partake in, and some of those events, it makes sense to pass the event. Here's one. And other times it makes sense to deliberately sabotage the event because you know that someone else is going to suffer more from the failing and the penalty than you do. And so the mechanic works. It doesn't work particularly well in Tabletop Simulator that you pass a bag around, and it usually not the one that I drew, but most often the historical events revolve around playing a certain number of blocks in a bag. And so there's an element of social deception there of, oh yes, I'll pay this many blocks into the bag if you do too, and then sort of trying to get other people to play their blocks erroneously, and you sort of backstab them, and trying the element of trickery in the game is something that it has sort of evolved from playtesting and seeing people trying to figure out how to outfox one another, how to best use the territories, how to benefit from others and the work they're doing, but also, as I said, carve a pathway for their own. And often the scores from the playtesting I've found that they're usually very tight. And often it comes down to this impact to distinguish the players, which I really love.
Yes.
That, you can build up influence as much as you like, but at the end of the day, the one that's caused more impact to the site will be punished. And usually that's me when I play. So
Or me.
it backfires on me. um, but um, but yeah, sorry, that was a very long-winded answer to your question. I
No.
apologize.
This was
I got
very
carried
interesting
away.
and really well done. And I'm really listening to this because I'm impressed. And there are some comments here from the chat. That Jay Foolscott is saying sounds, and this was related to that you can change your views. So going from a determinist to another thought. So he's saying, or they saying, sounds a bit like train games with stocks. Yeah, a little bit maybe. So you can switch your opinion and then try to do something else. And yeah, also commenting seems very clever. And yes, this game is
Thank
very
you.
clever. And I think also the playing time of 2 hours is not bad because you're talking and the at the table. Of course, if I play with this TTS module, it would be 4 hours because it's my thick fingers. But otherwise, it's fine. And there's another question. Kras Spitzdolch is asking, if there is a TTS, can you test play the game via TTS? And if not, is that planned for a later date, Alison? So, what is the status of testing at this moment?
So status of testing is I always want to keep testing. Like there are quite a few parts of the game that I want to refine and tweak and make
Mm-hmm.
better. So in terms of playtesters, I'm always interested. If anyone would like to playtest, and they can get in contact with me. Um, Getting in contact with me is difficult because I don't have a social media presence. Um, but if you have a way of contacting Uli, hopefully Uli can
Yeah.
pass on to me if that's okay.
Yes.
There is a public tabletop simulator mod that everyone can enjoy and play. So that's available on Steam. So you can either play with your friends independent of me, and then pass on any feedback through Uli, I guess. Or reach out to Uli and we can organize a session if you're interested. Because I'd love to hear the thoughts of anyone that's interested and make the game better.
Yeah, I think yeah, so. If somebody wants to get in touch with Alison, drop me a mail. I'm giving my mail address later. And Alison,
Thank you, Uli.
and and Alison, can you put down the TTS module
Yes.
for
Yes.
this at this moment? Because I'd like to ask you maybe a final question. What are your uh, plans, your further plans with the game? What are you thinking? Also time wise.
Time wise. So I must admit, as I said, this is the whole world of sort of taking a game, developing it, testing it, publishing it. It's just so incredible and foreign to me. Like a year ago, it was just a game, one physical copy sitting in a cupboard. And now, through the process of Zenobia and working with my incredible mentoring team of Maurice Suckling and Dan Burt, who've just been the most wonderful, supportive, brilliant, fantastic, incredible people. I can't speak more highly of what they've done and what they continue to do to support me. So I really want to thank them, as always. Um, Through working and doing all this, I would love for this game to be published. I naturally would love it, but it still seems like this, incredible concept for me, that I can take a design that I do and work on and publish it. So I'm at the moment still trying to learn from the people around me of what's the best process and naturally trying to see what the options are for Winay Kawsay, because it would be beyond my wildest imaginations to get it published, but it is something that through Zenobia it actually seems like it could happen. It
It,
seems like a real thing.
uh,
So I would love to get it to that point. Timeline wise, I have absolutely no idea. It really depends on an interest and who engages me and talks to me and what they suggest.
yeah, I think this game has a good chance that it will be published. You never know. You never know. This world, this tabletop world, is strange. It's very weird. So, but I think the chances are very good. And Gras Spitzdolch is saying, I was looking forward to this game before, and now I can hardly wait. Thanks for the overview and the insights. Yeah,
No,
I think
thank
so.
you.
I really, yeah, and from my point of view now, I would like to mention one more thing. If you even want to know more about the game, then you now know. Check out the San Diego HistoryCon event on November 12 to 14. So this is the next but one weekend, because all the Zenobia finalists will appear. So Alison too, and let me put in the URL here of that
Okay.
event.
I'd love to comment quickly, just
Yeah,
like
please,
if you
please.
haven't at all explored the Zenobia Award or the finalists, but also the prototype contestants that were published their synopses. Like there are some absolutely incredible ideas in there,
Yes.
some fantastic games, and it is definitely worth exploring and looking and seeing what some other incredible people from all over the globe have done. And SD Hiscon, all the finalists and another contestant as well, are going to be there and demoing their game and talking about their game. And there's even a nice panel being done by Liz Davidson about the Zenobia Award. So please, if you're interested, come have a look.
Yes.
We'll all be there demoing and showing off our games. So it'd be wonderful for anyone who would like to come and have a look. And I can't speak more highly of the other contestants and especially the other finalists and their incredible games.
Yes, I really agree, and the San Diego History Con event is also very good, and it's run by Harold Buchanan and his team, and this is also something you should check out if you have the time. So thank you very much, Alison. It was really my pleasure. And hopefully you have a great night because it's. I think in the background it's already not dark. Already the light it's getting lighter. No, hopefully you get a couple of hours sleep. And
Thank you.
next week here will be a regular episode with me presenting Spielworxx and industry news. And if you have a question that you'd like to ask in advance, or would like to talk about a special topic, or would like to get in touch with Alison, please drop me a mail at uli@spielworxx.de. That is uli@spielworxx.de. And to all viewers, thank you so much. And yeah, till next week, bleibt alle gesund, Black Lives Matter. Bye bye. And thanks again, Alison. Thank
No,
you.
thank you, Uli. Bye.
Bye.